Okay, everyone should have heard that. Good morning, and I want to welcome you to the first in a series of 2 webinars on business succession planning for economic development professionals. And apart from a lot of the sessions that we do targeted strictly for business owners, our session today is going to be kind of geared towards economic development professionals, give you a little background on succession planning as a process, and also maybe provide some hints and some resources for you as you move around the businesses in your area and talk to them and try to get them to start planning for succession. One of the things that we always say is that business succession planning is the single most underutilized form of economic development and job and business retention. And we'll get into some of that as we go through it. In the room here with me, I have Jay Simachek, who is my partner. I should say my name is Chris Cooper, and here in the room with me is my partner, Jay Simachek. And both of us work at the Business Succession Planning Program at Kent State University, which is a kind of a subsidiary, so to speak, of the Ohio Employee Ownership Center.
Good morning.
And so what we do is, our job is we are an outreach and training center here at Kent State University in Ohio, and we work primarily with small business owners who are looking to transition out of their business via one way or another. And one of the methods that we do, which is part of the Ohio Employee Ownership Center, is employee ownership. In that, we're talking about ESOPs, employee stock ownership plans, and employee-owned cooperatives. So we're not going to get into a lot of detail about any particular method here. These 2 webinars are going to be augmented by another series of webinars that we're doing that will dig into a little more detail about these issues. And those start in January, and I'll provide everyone information on that as well. So to get started, I'm going to run through a few statistics just to kind of give you a sense of what we're talking about here. In the United States, we have about 8,500 public companies who employ about 24% of the U.S. workforce. And one of the things that is often frustrating for us as economic development people is that oftentimes the only companies you hear about are the large publicly traded, publicly owned companies. And when you pick up your business newspaper, your business pages, and you read a business story, you're often just reading about the larger companies. And what we try to tell everybody is that the big engine of our economy are the 4.6 million family-owned, closely held businesses. And just as we say 24% for the public companies, the privately held businesses employ about 76% of the U.S. workforce. So as you can see, you will often hear a lot of politicians, a lot of public leaders talk about that small business is the engine that drives the U.S. economy, and in this case, the politicians are not talking hyperbole. They are actually speaking the truth. So, and as we go further, small and medium-sized businesses create about 65% of net jobs in the U.S. And when you compare that to the Fortune 500 companies, the large publicly traded companies, Fortune 500 companies are net liquidators of jobs. As you can see, really not just the job retention, but the job growth in our economy is through the small businesses, through the closely held family-owned businesses. And since January 2000, Ohio has lost 308,000 manufacturing jobs, and actually this number is probably a little low now. The last 6 months or so haven't been really good for manufacturing jobs in Ohio, let alone a lot of the other states out there. So my guess is that number is probably closer to 500,000 right now. And one of the things that we talk about when we talk about manufacturing jobs, why should we worry so much about manufacturing jobs? Well, that job loss, incidentally, is about 28% of the manufacturing base in Ohio. Why we worry about manufacturing jobs is you'll often hear a lot of economists talk about it not being that big of a deal, that we don't necessarily make a lot of stuff in the United States anymore. With the global trade structure that we have right now, a lot of economists say that we're better off focusing on some of the other economic drivers and not worry so much about manufacturing. But traditionally, manufacturing jobs have been the high-paying jobs. I spent a lot of time prior to joining the center to working in the service industry, and I can tell you from firsthand experience that the service industry jobs tend not to pay as much. They tend not to offer benefits, offer retirement plans, those types of things. So it's those manufacturing jobs that really create the middle-class jobs and really allow people to, in a sense, pull themselves up from the bootstraps. So we'll move forward. Since January 2000, there has been a net loss of 150,000 jobs in Ohio. Again, that number's probably slightly out of date. It's probably closer to 250, 300,000 right now, net job loss in the state of Ohio. The recent job numbers came out nationally, and apparently the drop in lost jobs wasn't as severe as maybe a lot of folks were expecting, but it's still a pretty serious issue going on out there. You'll hear a lot of folks talk about whether or not this is going to be a jobless recovery and whether or not there might be a double-dip recession. So that's kind of the general economic climate that's out there. And one of the things that we often talk about is the rather dismal numbers of small business owners who successfully transfer their business to the next generation. Some 20 years ago, when a study was first done on how many businesses actually make it to the second generation, the number was about 30%. And that's kind of like the industry standard when you talk to your average practitioner or economic development person. They'll tell you about 30% of the businesses make it to the second generation. Now, there was a recent study out from the SBA that the number has actually gotten a little bit worse. We're looking at 15% now make it to the 15% make it to the third generation. So when we're talking about businesses from the second generation, 30% make it. When they go to the third generation, about 15% make it. Now the new study numbers are that 15% make it to the second generation. This is a relatively recent, probably 2 or 3 year old study from the Small Business Administration, that currently about 15% of the businesses make it to the second generation, and about 5% make it to the third. And again, there's a lot of reasons as to why that happens. We're not here to say that the big bulk of this loss of businesses is due to the lack of proper succession planning, even though we believe it's a big part of it. A lot of it is the change in demographics. 40, 50 years ago, 30 years ago, it was quite common to see the children of a small business owner go into the family business and continue to run it. Nowadays, what you'll see often is that those children, if the business owner, if the business owner is successful, they're able to send their children to college. Those children, generally speaking, come up with their own plan as to how they want to live their life, come up with a career, get a skill, get a trade, whatever it might be, and decide that the last thing they want to do is get into the family business. So, that's always an issue. Some businesses just have a natural life cycle. The big chunk of small businesses out there are probably either 1 or 2 person shops, or at least under 5 employee shops. So a lot of those businesses are quite small, and when the first generation or the founding generation leaves, the business leaves with it. And so there's a lot of natural kind of turnover on businesses that we're talking about here. But we firmly believe that a big chunk of that is due to improper planning by business owners for what happens when they exit the business. And again, that exit of the business can either be through retirement or something a little bit more unfortunate happening, such as death or disability. So, and to back up this, there was a recent COSI study. For those of you who aren't in Ohio nor Northeast Ohio, COSI stands for the Council of Smaller Enterprises. It's an offshoot of the local regional Cleveland Chamber of Commerce. And so their primary focus is on small businesses. And they did a study a while back and found that only 21% of small businesses have a succession plan. So we're talking about 79% of those businesses that don't have a proper succession plan. Some of those businesses may have started a succession plan and not finished it or not implemented it, or any number of things that might have happened. So it's a pretty dismal percentage that actually properly plan for this process. Again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to bring those up. I'm going to keep on going unless I hear anything, so we'll just keep on moving. The next slide says the worst case. So what happens when we lose these small businesses? Well, we see it in a lot of communities in Northeast Ohio here, where a business shuts. Small business is roughly defined by the Small Business Administration as being 500 employees or less. Generally speaking, the company size that we work with is probably 200 employees or less, and probably the bulk of those are probably under 100 employees. So when you dig down, drill down, businesses shut, employees lose their jobs, communities lose their tax base, quality of life in the community suffers, city services suffer, community services suffer, and essentially what we see is what we call the domino effect. And it just it tends to build bad news tends to build upon bad news. So we see that again in a lot of communities here in Northeast Ohio. And when we talk about the importance of succession planning, the real key is it improves the chances of survival, obviously. It's a real big issue when you do not have a proper succession plan for the business owner. Everything becomes more difficult with the transitioning of that business, including survival. And we always say it's the responsibility of management, whether that management team is an ownership stake, has an ownership stake in the business or not. It's really key for that management team to be up on pushing through a succession plan. And of course, it's in the interest of stakeholders. And just a real quick note on stakeholders. A lot of times when you're out in the community or when you talk to economic development folks, politicians, business owners, employees, when you mention stakeholders, they ask you, why aren't you talking about stockholders? And we like to maintain that difference between stockholders and stakeholders. Obviously, the stockholders are the people that actually own stock in the business. And a lot of small businesses that may be a husband and wife, or just a husband or a wife, or a husband and a wife, or the parents and maybe a child or two. But we really like to use a broader definition of stakeholder. When we talk about stakeholders, there's the customers of that business, there's the suppliers of that business. They rely on that business to be strong, to maintain their cash flows. And we're talking about children, family members, whether they're in the business or not. Even if you have a child that's not in the business, they look at it as perhaps something that they're going to receive a benefit from, whether it's becoming a part owner of the business or getting a portion of the proceeds of that business somewhere down the line. And of course, it's just prudent. It's just fundamentally good and sound business strategy. And again, another stakeholder, we have the communities that the businesses reside in. We have the employees, and so on down the line. So we like to really maintain a broad view of stakeholders when we're talking about a small business. And essentially, small business succession planning can often get very complicated very quickly. And so when we talk to the average business owner from an economic development perspective, what we really try to do is really just try to simplify it as much as possible. Take it in small steps. Start early enough that you can afford to take it in small steps, but really kind of break it down so you don't start. Oftentimes, when you talk to practitioners, they can very quickly start talking in legal language, start talking in accounting language, and start talking about taxes and laws and all those types of things that for the average business owner can start to sort of glaze their eyes over in many cases. So again, we try to really simplify the process as much as we can. And so what we tell business owners that there are essentially three ways to succeed a business. And you can sell or transfer to family members, and that's pretty straightforward. you can sell it or transfer it to some or all employees. We work with a lot of quite small businesses that have done a form of direct stock ownership by the employees, where each employee will pull together their savings and buy an equity stake in the business, or by using an employee stock ownership plan or an ESOP or a worker-owned cooperative. You can sell to all of the employees that way. There's also some partial management buyout options that we will talk about later too that you could do. Or the third option is you can sell to an outside buyer. And when you talk to a lot of business owners, fundamentally, often what they'll look at is either a sale or transfer to family, or they'll have a pretty good sense that the family option really isn't there, so they automatically start thinking about sale to an outside buyer. And a lot of business owners also, they tend to look at that sale to an outside buyer as perhaps making their wildest dreams come true as to how much money they're going to be able to get out of the business. We're going to get into the little more detail about inside and outside buyers, but the fact of the matter is that sometimes selling to that outside buyer doesn't necessarily lead to that financial nirvana that they may be looking for. So those are the big, really the three major ways that you can transfer a business, or who you transfer a business to. Okay, let's go. And when we talk about a succession plan, there's again, one of the keys to talking to business owners on a regular basis about how they want to start thinking about succession is that there's three fundamental elements of a succession plan, and the first is transactional. And the transactional element, all that kind of refers to is to how you actually, what are the legal methods that you use to transfer the ownership, stake, the stock of a company to a new party. So we're talking about the actual legal elements there. And the second is economic. And when we talk about economics, that element really relates to the business owner. How much money are they going to get out of the business? How much money do they need to survive in retirement or finance their retirement? And how are those economic issues going to affect the transaction? And then the third, and one that we tend to focus on quite a bit with small business owners, is the personal. A lot of business owners, they have a lot of feelings about their business, and some of those feelings may include that they can't wait to get out of the business. But a lot of business owners that we talk to, this business is their baby, so to speak, and they're very proud of the business that they've been able to build. And they have personal issues, like they want to either reward the employees for their years of service and helping them build the business, or they look at it as they're proud of the fact that they can drive down the street in their community, and that business is a tremendous asset to the community. That business may have provided them a sense of prestige within the community. So there's a lot of personal things that go into a succession plan as well. And especially, again, personal issues can be huge when you're talking about transferring the business to family members. There's a ton of personal issues there, and a lot of times business owners aren't prepared for the level of thinking and quite frankly feeling that they're going to have to do about those issues as they go through the process. So those are the three fundamental elements. And one of the other ways that we use to communicate to business owners when we're talking from an economic development perspective on transferring a business is you can even limit it to even two options: a sale or transfer to insiders. And by insiders, we could say family members and or employees, whether it's a small group or a whole group of employees. And a sale or transfer to outsiders. And one of the things that we really try to focus on, some business owners decide, a lot of business owners do nothing. And do nothing is an option that they have. But some business owners decide to do nothing out of procrastination or just not getting around to planning for succession. And a lot of business owners decide to do nothing because that's the choice that they've made. They've made an active choice to do nothing. And so we really have to communicate to business owners that doing nothing is a choice. And in actuality, what that does is it takes the control of what happens out of their hands and puts it into the hands of other people. And again, some business owners are quite happy to have that happen, but most business owners probably are not. One of the reasons why business owners are business owners is they like being in control. They've decided at some point in their career or some point in their life that they don't like working for other people. They like being in control. So when you kind of talk to them that what they're essentially doing is giving up control, it can sometimes move them to some action. And again, a lot of what we're going to talk about here today is how do we move business owners to action. And action is different than just thinking about it or just talking about it, but it's actually doing some concrete steps, concrete things to actually transfer the business. And there's a lot of reasons as to why business owners do or do not plan, and there's a lot of things that happen when they do or do not plan. And some of those difficulties that occur are listed here. The first one we're going to talk about is, well, the first two, death and taxes. And, it's the common line that we use. There's only two things that you can count on in life, and they are death and taxes. And a lot of business owners, when they start thinking about leaving their business, start thinking about retiring, their mind starts thinking about death, about the end-of-life issues. Oftentimes this business is such an integral part of not just what they do for a living, but who they are. And so when we're talking about death, that's where their mind leads. And I talked to many business owners, talked to one a couple weeks ago, who was a business owner, and he had a friend of his that was also a business owner, left the business when he was 62, 63. And that business owner, it seemed that once that other business owner left, his life became, in some sense, without direction and was dead within a few years. So the business owner I talked to was I'm going to work until the day I die. And that's what's going to keep me moving. That's what's going to keep me going and keep me motivated and keep me living. So that's a real big issue. And when that occurs, what we try to tell small business owners is that that's great. We really encourage you to work at your business if this is what makes you happy, what fulfills you on a real personal level. That's great. The idea is that what's going to happen to that business once you do become disabled or die while you're still running the business. So our goal is to keep the business open after that happens. Another issue is taxes. A lot of business owners, one of the things that we do when we talk to business owners is we really kind of de-emphasize the tax issue. We don't encourage anyone to pay more taxes than they should. Nobody likes paying taxes. They are a fact of life. But we really encourage folks to take a look at some other issues. Don't start with the tax issue. Figure out what it is you want to do and find the most tax-advantaged way to accomplish that. So we tend to de-emphasize the tax issue somewhat. Another thing is risk. Risk is a big issue. The longer you wait to start planning for succession, the riskier it becomes, the more risk there is in actually implementing any plan that you do come up with. So that's a big issue. And again, for a business owner, there's a personal risk there too. A lot of business owners aren't sure what's going to happen once they exit the business, so that becomes a personal risk for them, whether it's financial, whether it's personal, emotional, whatever it might be. There's riskiness there for the business owner as well. And again, I briefly touched on the control issue previously. Business owners really don't like giving up that control. And they aren't sure that they're ready to do that. And we've seen many cases where the business owner starts putting a succession plan in place, and then at the relatively last minute decides, I'm not ready to give up control here yet, and they stick around a little while longer. Life changes, and that kind of deals in with the death issue and the mortality issue and the retirement. My father was a small business owner, and for years he worked until he was in his early 70s. And for years, my mother was trying to get him to retire so they could start enjoying their retirement years. And my dad says, well, maybe next year, and that turned out to be, 5, 6, 7, 8 years down the line. And then once my dad did retire and he was home all day with my mother, it kind of drove my mother crazy. And so those are real issues. It's kind of, I don't mean to poo-poo those kind of things, but it's a big issue, and it can have a real negative effect on the small business and the small business owner and their family. And again, the relationships issue, and that gets into the family members, the relationships with the community. We worked with some business owners that they sold their business to an outside buyer, and that outside buyer came in and virtually shut the business down, put a bunch of people out of work. And every time, I can think of one example, every time a certain business owner went to church, for example, he had to go to church. He went to church with some of the employees that lost their jobs because of their succession planning plan that they put in place. And so that changed their relationships with the community in which they lived. And they weren't necessarily prepared for that, and so that could be a big issue. And again, there's also the family parts. We've seen a lot of families kind of implode because of the succession planning or lack of succession planning, either way, on what the first generation put in place. And so those are very real issues that tend to scare a lot of business owners. The next one is options. We always talk about that the longer you choose to wait to design and implement a plan, the fewer your options are. We see situations where a business owner becomes disabled or dies unexpectedly, and their options become almost virtually nil. Oftentimes the only option they have left in that situation, or the surviving spouse or family has left in that situation, is liquidation. And that's obviously not a positive outcome. And then the final one that we're talking about here is value. The less planning you do, the less value your business is going to have. Whether you're selling to an outside buyer, transferring it to family, or selling it to the employees, the more planning you can put in place, the more processes you can have in place, the less the business relies on the current generation of ownership, the less important that current generation of ownership is to the day-to-day running of the business, the more value that business is going to have. So it's actually going to increase, in most cases, not every case, but it's probably going to increase the value, the amount of money that the business owner is going to be able to take out of that business. So it's often when we talk to business owners, when we describe it in that way, it becomes a little bit more important in their eyes to start thinking about this as a subject. The next slide here, we like, again, to try to simplify the process for the average business owner. And what we do is try to break it down into a series of steps. And obviously, that kind of, the first one there where it says start, the step issue, starting is not, it's not meant to be flip, I guess is the way to put it. A lot of times with the average business owner, the hardest thing that you're going to get them to do is just start on the process. Many times business owners are so tied up in the day-to-day running of their business that they just say, well, today I have to put out this fire, and I'll start thinking about succession tomorrow. And again, tomorrow will come, and they'll have to put out that day's particular fire within the business, and they'll say, well, I guess I'll just have to start thinking about succession tomorrow, the next day, and so on and so forth. So again, just kind of having that initial conversation with a business owner is really a good thing, because it really provides an impetus for them to just start the process. And a real key in our mind, again, it gets back to what I mentioned about with the tax issue, is identify the owner's needs and goals. And each owner's needs and goals are very different. We're going to get into a little further detail about those, but quickly, Needs are what the business owner needs. You can talk about financial needs. What kind of income are they going to need to finance their retirement? You can talk about emotional needs. What kind of role do they want to maintain in the business? Are they still going to have an emotional attachment to the business? Do they get emotional about the role that the business has within the community, as I mentioned earlier? And oftentimes, that business owner really doesn't want to talk about those emotional type issues. So sometimes you have to drag them kind of kicking and screaming into that discussion. But it's a real important discussion to have. And again, the same thing applies for the goals. Where do they see themselves? Where do they see the business? Where do they see their children? Where do they see the employees? All those types of things the owner has to get a good grasp on before they start the process. Again, oftentimes you'll see practitioners will kind of start in with the methods, so to speak, with the actual structures, legal documents, whatever that they're going to use to actually transfer ownership. And we think that it should start a little bit further back, where the business owner kind of sits down, literally, with a sheet of paper and really maps out their needs and goals throughout the upcoming 5, 10, 15 years. And again, we talk to a lot of business owners with the next item there who call us and say, can you tell me who to use? Which lawyer do I need? What accountant do I need? What valuator do I need? Which financial advisor should I choose? And we really try to kind of push that back onto the business owner. And we ask them to research and identify professions. Now, we maintain a database, and it's on our website, of service providers, what we call service providers or practitioners, that can actually help the business owner do the legal stuff, the accounting stuff that they have to do in order to transfer a business. But we think it's really pivotal that the business owner makes the choice on who that is. Oftentimes, the people that they choose to do this stuff are going to be more than just their lawyer, more than just their accountant. What they're going to be is, in a sense, almost counselors, emotionally, financially, philosophically. These people are going to be very important in their life over the next couple years, or sometimes even longer. So we really think it's key that the business owner decides who they're going to use in that particular case. And they really need to research it and interview people that they're going to be working with. One of the things that we really encourage business owners to do when they're looking at professionals is find the people that are interested in implementing their goals, their needs, their desires, instead of trying to fit the business owner into what that advisor thinks is the latest and greatest technique or scheme, or however you want to classify it. And most professionals who do this type of work will do that. Most practitioners will not try to shoehorn a square peg into a round hole. But there are, that's something that really needs to be worked through. And again, the next item here is drafting and communicating the plan. We work with a lot of business owners who get up to this point and don't actually draft a plan, or if they do draft a plan, they don't communicate to anyone what that plan is. And when you're talking about communicating a plan, you could be, we see situations where a business owner will have multiple advisors and they're not talking to one another. So oftentimes they're not communicating the plan to their full stable of advisors. They're not communicating the plan to their spouse, their children, or to their employees. And again, you don't necessarily want to tell everybody everything. Not everybody needs to know everything. But at a level that's appropriate, you want to communicate to people that, one, that you're thinking about this, you're doing something about it, you're working on it, you're implementing a plan, and things are going smoothly. And again, the last item, revisit the plan, we see often where business owners will put together a great plan, and it'll sit on a shelf for 2, 5, 10, 20 years. And as we all know, as an economic development professional, when you work with small businesses, very rarely from year to year do things stay the same within that business. Whether it's external pressures like the economy, whether it's internal pressures like losing a key employee or becoming disabled or whatever it might be, things change, and a business owner has to be willing to revisit that plan. Our general rule of thumb is you want to do it probably every other year unless something major happens. If something really big happens within your business, even if you just revisited the plan 6 months ago, if there's a major change in the business, you got to look at the plan and make sure it still accomplishes what it is you want to accomplish.
If I might interject here, Chris.
Sure, Jack.
And in that list of steps, as Chris said, the key is the very first one. The key is getting the business owner to start. Okay, and often that's a challenge. We talk to a number of business owners, and we present a lot of material, a lot of training to small business owners. We find it a challenge to kind of hit the hot button with the small business owner in terms of getting them to recognize that they need to do the succession plan. And as economic development professionals, we know that there's a vested interest here. If we can hit that hot button, then we know we have a likelihood of saving some jobs in the future. So it's in the best interest to us and the community if we can identify what it takes to get the attention of that small business owner. And I think these next few slides where Chris is going to go over a few of the questions may be key to that. So listen up, and if in communicating with a small business owner, you can ask him or her a question that gets their attention, that often is enough to get them started.
Yeah, again, exactly. It's really key to hit that hot button, because that's really what's going to motivate that business owner to do something about it. I was talking to a practitioner friend of mine who's in the public sector, and he said that most business owners don't start thinking about succession until something happens, okay, something that pushes that hot button for them, and it could be any number of things that hits that hot button. But it's that hot button thing that really kind of lights the fire and gets that business owner moving forward. So there's no magic hot button for any, each business owner is different, but it's really key to try and figure out what that is and see if you can't motivate them to move. And again, when we go through a process with small business owners, what we do is go through a series of questions for that small business owner. Jay and I recently, within the last couple months, went and talked to a business owner, and we went through this exact process, essentially. We just started asking questions and trying to figure out where the business owner was. And some of the questions are, does the business owner need the sale or transfer proceeds from the business to finance their retirement? That's real key. Do they have other investments, other income that they're going to have? Are they looking to maximize the value that they get out of the business in order to finance their retirement? And the second part of that is, can the business support that? We've seen some situations where the business owner proceeds to build this business over the course of 15, 20, 30 years, and then when it comes time to leave the business, they, in a sense, bleed the business dry, and they really make it impossible for that business to continue, even though on some level they would have liked to have seen it continue. So that's a real big issue. Can the business cash flow support what the business owner is looking to get out of the business? And the next question is, do I have family members in the business? Business owners, we kind of talked about some of the family dynamics a little bit ago, but family members in the business have different sets of needs and goals, and family members outside of the business have a second set of needs and goals. So as you're going through this process, you want to ask, okay, who's in, who's out, who's going to be in, who's going to be out? Are you bringing family members in that haven't previously been in the business? That can create a whole set of issues for the business. And do they rely on the business for their income? How much do you feel beholden to your children or other family members on providing them with a livelihood? Some business owners approach that differently than others. So you really want to take a good, hard look at that, and not only do they rely on it now, but do you want them to be able to rely on that income later, once you leave. And would you like to see the business continue as a viable entity after you leave? For some business owners, that's a real simple question, because they'll just say, I don't care. We've talked to some business owners that have actually said that to us. They don't care what happens to the business. When they're ready to get out, they want to get out, and they want to go sit on the beach in Florida. We get a lot of business owners that are really take a lot of pride in that business. And again, as I mentioned earlier, take pride in the role of that business within the community and to the employees. So they really want to see the business continue as a viable entity after they leave.
And I would think that that would be the majority of cases. I would think there's a pride in ownership and a certain legacy issue here that most small business owners would really like to see that business they've worked so hard for over the years continue after they leave. So that can often be a real motivator.
Yeah, and I would agree with Jay that, you know, I think you get most business owners really view that as something that they want to do. It tends to be the person who really doesn't care tends to be the minority. Absolutely. The next slide is, can they let go of the business? That's a real big issue for small business owners. Again, we kind of touched around this with previous comments, but we tend to see this more often when you're transferring it to family members or employees or to key management people. Because the issue with selling to an outside buyer, unless there's an arrangement for that for the seller to remain in the business over a short period of time to help the buyer kind of ease their way into running the business, generally speaking, when you sell the business to an outside buyer, they're going to show you the door, and they're not going to let you back in. So that becomes less of an issue for the business owner. Now, when we see the business owner transfer the business to perhaps children, often what we see is that the business owner doesn't want to give up the corner office, so to speak, or continues to come in on a semi-regular basis and doesn't necessarily approve of the way that the children are running the business, of the decisions that they are making. And the real key in that type of situation is you gotta really give up control of that business. And some business owners are ready to do that, and some aren't. But in order for the business to really grow with the new generation of ownership, you really got to lay off and really allow that business, the new generation of owner, to make their own decisions, to make their own mistakes, and really move the business in the way they think is best. And I'm going to briefly talk here about some family issues that we see. These tend to be major issues that a lot of business owners aren't necessarily prepared for. And in many cases, it doesn't matter if there's family members who are going to take over the business or not. We see just as many arguments occur over the proceeds of a sale of a business as we do with the transferring of ownership of a business. Or if you're transferring a business to an outside buyer, and so a lot of times that causes friction within the family, because the next generation of family members just assumed that they'd be able to come in and take over the business. So that can create huge issues. And when we're talking about family issues, we see there's a dynamic between owners. We see a lot of small businesses that might be two brothers or two sisters or a combination thereof, where when one owner is perhaps older than another owner and wants to get out a little sooner, and when they get out, they take their expertise and their ability with them, and the other owners aren't necessarily prepared for them leaving the business. That can create a lot of family issues. We can talk about spouses. I put in there or spice. One of the things that we're seeing here, spice is the plural of spouse, like mice is the plural of mouse. That's my one joke for the webinar today. What we see is a lot of business owners have second families. Okay, they'll have so that you'll have stepbrothers and stepsisters. And they'll have an ex-wife or an ex-husband lurking in the wings. And how do you deal with those types of things? the first family is going to want some, the second family is probably going to want some, the ex-spouse is going to want some, and the new spouse is going to want some. So that creates a whole a large number of issues for the business owner to work through. And unfortunately, the business owner is just going to have to work through them. And oftentimes they don't want to do that, so they'll not plan for that. So we got to find a way to talk to them and communicate to them that this is really important for them to talk through. You got parents, siblings, and in-laws. Again, that kind of can get into the spouse and/or spouse issue. But you know, a lot of times the parent, the current generation of ownership has got to take a look at the next generation of ownership and just decide who's in and who's out, who's perhaps going to get some financial proceeds and not ownership of the business. They're going to have to work through all those issues. They're going to have to decide which one of their children is more capable of running the business, which is a very difficult thing for the business owner to work through. And so that can be a huge issue in children and grandchildren. Again, it's the same. We've dealt with some businesses that have skipped the children and gone right to the grandchildren with ownership because the grandchildren were the apples of their eyes and their children were a bunch of ne'er-do-wells or no good people who can't get their act together. So we've seen situations like that as well. And when you're talking about family issues, you're talking about communication. You want to keep the lines of communication open. We've seen some situations where a business owner unexpectedly becomes disabled or dies, and then hasn't informed their spouse or their children what their intentions were, what plans they had for each of them. And so in the midst of a real emotional issue for the surviving family members, not only are they going to have to deal with those emotional and personal issues, they're going to have to deal with those business and financial issues that they might have wished mom or dad had worked through a little bit better. So that's a real issue. The second one is competency, and I kind of touched on it with the previous slide, is that business owners are going to have to look at, if they're bringing one or more family members into that business, they're going to have to look to see whether or not each one of them is competent. Who's the more competent to run the business? Who's got the skills? We'll see an issue where the parents will look at the youngest child as perhaps the most competent to actually run the business, and the oldest child will be expecting that they will come in and run the business. And when they have to inform both of them that this is what they think is best for the business, creates real family tension, can create some real family issues there. So asking a parent to choose between one or more of their children is never an easy thing to do, but it's something that the business owner is going to have to work through. The last issue there is fairness or equality. We see a lot of parents who want to treat other children equally. Asking a parent which one of your children do you love the most is a very serious thing to do. And what we always encourage people to do is look at fairness instead of equality. Oftentimes in a family business situation, it'll be obvious even if you have two or more children within the business, it'll be relatively obvious which of those children provides more value to that business. And so it's really key that we look at fairness. And if you're looking at a second child who perhaps does not add as much value to the business, but you still want to reward them for being one of your children, there's other ways to reward that child other than ownership of the business. Perhaps there's other investments that they can become the beneficiary of and kind of even out the financial gain in that way, but still keep the ownership and the running of the business with the child that's actually going to make us be better prepared to handle that responsibility. So we always encourage parents and business owners to look at fairness rather than equality. Oftentimes you'll see a business owner that won't listen to any of that and will want to do the equality thing anyways. and that's okay. Sometimes that works, often it doesn't, but again, if we're going to be talking about the owner's needs and goals, if that's their need, if that's their goal, then that's what it is, so we'll do that as well. And again, I want to encourage folks, if you have any questions, feel free to bring them up. I'm going to keep on talking here. We've got a few minutes left. I'm running a little bit late, but we'll be done here in about 5 minutes. The next issue is management succession. And again, when we talk about business succession planning, we generally talk about who's going to get the ownership of that business, the actual ownership. One of the things that we have to always also look at with business owners is not only who's going to own it, but who's going to run it. Oftentimes, the ownership, the next generation of ownership, is not necessarily the right group of people to be the next generation of management. So we really encourage business owners to look at management succession. And we say it's often overlooked. I think intuitively most business owners understand that they have to work on this. But again, they tend to be control freaks. Perhaps that's a little too strong. They tend to be people who like to control things. So they don't like to give up the day-to-day running of the business as much as they don't like to give up the day-to-day ownership of the business. It's very important, and again, it creates and maintains value. If you have a good management team in place that's going to be there after you leave the business, especially if you're looking to sell to an outside buyer, that's really going to create and maintain a lot of value for that selling owner. If the next generation of ownership is going to know that they're going to come into this business and it's going to keep on percolating quite smoothly and generating income for them, they're going to be much more willing to buy that business and perhaps to pay a premium for that business as well. And again, a lot of very small business owners, they have many roles within the business. You know, they could be the chief salesperson, the chief engineer, the person who sweeps up the place after everyone else has left. They could be the bookkeeper. They could be, you know, any number of roles within that business. And it's really key that when the business owner is looking to exit that business, they know who's going to take over those responsibilities once they leave. Again, that creates and maintains value. The worst thing that a business owner can do is leave the business and take all the contacts. If the business owner is the key salesperson, they have all the contacts with the key customers, and they leave and they don't groom someone else to take over that role, perhaps your customers are going to go somewhere else for their business, and that's really going to adversely affect the business. So it's really key for the business owner to look at ways in not only how to give up the ownership of the business, but to transition the management of the business. And the final slide for today, again, we're going to continue this on Thursday morning, is time frame. We deal with a lot of small business owners that contact us. They woke up one morning and they say, okay, now is the time for me to leave this business. I want to be out in 3 months. And, you know, a lot of business succession plans can be done in that short time frame. You know, the general rule of thumb is it can take anywhere from 3 months to 20 years. We've worked with some business owners that we contacted literally 20 years ago, and have contacted us again recently and say they're ready to do it now. Sometimes it takes that long period of time for them to become comfortable with the idea, to have grown the business to where they think that it can run without them and they want to get out then. Ideally, from the time when a business owner starts planning to the time that they're out of the business, you know, we think it should be at least 1 to 2 years, and the ideal situation would be even longer than that, 3 to 5 years. Some folks that you'll talk to say 3 to 10 years. Again, the actual drawing up the documents and putting the legal things in place and doing the tax strategies and all that kind of stuff can be done relatively quickly. The real key is, has the business owner looked at their situation, is comfortable with the plan that they've come up with, and are ready to leave the business. Some succession plans, by the way they're designed, they take some time to implement. The business owner has to transition out of the business gradually, and so that can take you know, a number of years. And quite frankly, the business owner should be prepared for that if that's the plan they pick. So in an ideal world, you know, a business owner can get out pretty quickly. In the real world, it's not always that easy, and it takes some time. And the business owner who is 75 and realize that they have to be in the business for another 3 years against their will is not necessarily a prime situation to be in. So that's what I have for today's session. The next session on Thursday morning is going to go into a little more detail about some of the specific methods of transferring a business. It's going to talk a little bit about valuation, and again, the final part of it is going to be a little bit about resources and help that, as an economic development professional, especially in the state of Ohio, are out there and available for you. So if there's any questions, we can go ahead and take that now. If not, I'm going to go ahead and finish this first part of the presentation. And I look forward to seeing you on Thursday. There'll be time if you have questions that occur to you after we hang up here. You can always shoot me an email or drop me a line, or at the next session ask that question. And I think at that, I think we're finished. So if there's no other questions, we'll go ahead and end the session. Thank you for coming, and we'll see you on Thursday morning.
Thank you. Please stand by.